This conference will now be recorded.
All right, y'all, it is 5:30, so we will go ahead and get started. People can filter in if you've got friends joining. This is being recorded, so they should be able to see it, catch up on anything they missed. Thanks for coming. So welcome to the 2024 Bay Mini Grant Application Webinar and Q&A. My name is Jessica, and I am the Program Support Specialist at the Tampa Bay Estuary Program. Now we've got Sheila. Yeah.
Sheila Scalaro, Community Program Scientist, also with the Tampa Bay Estuary Program.
Thank you. The real Sheila, please stand up. So like I said, this will be recorded during the presentation. If you want to leave your cameras and especially your mics off, that would be great until the Q&A portion. And also hold on to your questions until the Q&A portion. Hopefully most of your questions will be answered during the info provided, but if not, there will be plenty of time to ask questions later. So let's get to it. So this is our agenda today. We will run through an overview of the Bay Mini Grant program, then we'll dive into the grant that's open right now, including eligibility, how to apply, and evaluation criteria. We'll aim to get through these items in the first 30 minutes so that there's at least 30 minutes left for your questions at the end. And everything we talked about today can be found at the website. This is it right here. You're welcome to go ahead and go to it and check it out if you want to. Sheila's going to throw that into the chat later as well. And this is the basic info for Bay Mini Grants. We'll dive into each of them. So this is just the overview. The mini grant award is up to $5,000. It is a reimbursement type of award, not to exceed the award amount that you're given. The project length is 12 months or less, starting January 1st and ending December 31st of 2024. And the purpose is environmental restoration or education. So engaging and informing the public for the benefit of water quality, habitat, and wildlife conservation goals that are within the Tampa Bay watershed. It's managed by us at the Tampa Bay Estuary Program, and it is funded by sale of the Tarpon Tag, which is a specialty license plate. So if you don't have it, go ahead and get you one. We'll talk about this a little bit later today too. And getting right down to the details. So who is eligible to apply? Any registered nonprofit organization, any educational institution like grade schools, community colleges, universities, private businesses are also eligible. And because this grant is intended to be used by and for the community, government entities aren't the target applicant, but local, county, and state governments can apply if there's like a really strong community engagement piece of the project. Individuals cannot apply, but if you are an individual that's interested in applying, I encourage you to reach out to a nonprofit that you might volunteer with, including like a neighborhood association where you live. Past award recipients have included nonprofits, educators, filmmakers, neighborhood associations, civic associations, student groups, artists, museum curators, researchers, and more. So if you're not sure if your organization is eligible, just ask us toward the end. So what is a watershed? We know that projects must occur within the Tampa Bay watershed. It has to provide a clear benefit to the Tampa Bay watershed, but what does that mean exactly? So a watershed is an area of land that drains or sheds water into a specific water body. In the case of the Tampa Bay watershed, rainfall that occurs within the red outline seen in the map eventually drains into Tampa Bay via creeks, streams, rivers, lakes, and man-made storm drains. The watershed is about 6 times larger than the estuary itself, and all of Hillsborough County, portions of Pinellas County, Pasco, and Manatee counties, and just a little sliver of Polk and Sarasota counties fall within the boundaries. Those eligible groups that we just talked about, they don't necessarily have to be in the watershed boundaries. For instance, a nonprofit who's maybe in Dunedin, which you can see is just outside of the boundaries, or a business in the east side of Lakeland, which is just outside the boundaries, would not necessarily be ineligible because their projects could be occurring in the watershed or directly benefiting the watershed, so that they could still be eligible in that regard. Just make sure that is crystal clear when you are putting in your application. And I will say many of our projects have been focused on the bay itself. I would love to see personally just more projects in the outer regions of the watershed, like Zephyrhills and Plant City, Lithia down in Bradley Junction. So if you work in any of those areas, I'd love to talk more about possibilities too. And you can explore this boundary map on the Tampa Bay Estuary Programs Bay Mini Grant website as well. So let's go back to the purpose of the grant, environmental restoration and education. Let's be a little bit more specific. So projects must address issues identified in this document. This is the Comprehensive Conservation and Management Plan for Tampa Bay. We shorten that name and call it the CCMP, so that's how I'll refer to it today, just a heads up. It contains a ton of information about what specific actions should be taken in order to restore and protect the Tampa Bay Estuary. There are 10 sections in the CCMP. Under each section, there are specific objectives and activities, and there are really two ways that you can use the CCMP. The first is, if you already know what project you want to do, you should figure out which of these 10 sections is most relevant to your project. Once you determine which of these sections is most relevant, you'll want to find the objective within that section that relates to your project. And I'll give you an example here. So let's say you want to do a project where you educate boaters about the importance of motoring slowly on the Hillsborough River to prevent shoreline erosion, damage to underwater plants, or injuring manatees. You might choose the Bay Habitat section of the CCMP. So you would use this BH-3 that you see on your screen, reduce propeller scarring of seagrass. BH3 is what you would want to include in your application. Or you might choose the Public Education and Involvement section, where you would see PE2 on the screen, promote public education about key issues affecting the Bay. Both of these are solid choices. You could include one or both in your application. Including both may make your application that much stronger. And whatever you choose, make sure that you clearly spell out which CCMP actions your project will address, both in your scope of work, which we'll talk about, and in the questions that specifically ask about this in the application. So I did say there's two ways to use the CCMP. This is the first way. Another way to use the CCMP is to use it to find project ideas. So on one hand, you may not know exactly what kind of project you want to do. You can use the CCMP to find an idea. So back to this Bay Habitats example under BH3. Check out the activity number 2 that's on the screen. Continue to maintain effective seagrass scarring reduction practices and so forth. There are more than 100 of these types of activities within the CCMP that you can select and form a project around. So you can use it if you already have an idea, or you can use it to help you get an idea of what you would like to do. This year, the Estuary Program's social media followers selected 3 high priority CCMP actions that they would like to see funded. So if your project falls into one of these 3 priority actions, your application is that much more likely to be funded. And really just about any Bay Mini Grant project should address the second or third action here, since public involvement and education is really one of the key tenets of Bay Mini Grants. And the first, as you can see, is related to mangrove education, plantings, and awareness. So these are high priorities this year, but remember that anything within the CCMP is eligible. So don't feel like you have to smush your project into one of these categories or include it in your project necessarily. You just do you. So this program has been going on since the 90s. There are a lot of past examples to look at. These are just a few of them. Under environmental restoration, you can see there are many different ways to tackle some aspect of restoration. Under environmental education, same thing. Whether you want to do some sort of participatory science project where the community gets involved in collecting data, or you want to combine environment and art, there are many ways to go about this. Your tip here is combine both of these. Projects that combine restoration and education are more likely to be funded, And also don't take these examples as gospel. While these examples are tried and true, projects that did get funded, we would absolutely love to see new and unique ideas too. So we've talked about who can apply and what will get funded. Now let's talk about how to apply. It might seem a little bit out of order to tell you how to apply before we've gone over how it will be evaluated, but I think just trust the process for now. I think this will be helpful. My first tip for how to apply is review all of the information before you get started. We aren't going to go over every little detail today, but you should before applying. And these are the steps that I recommend taking. Number one, review the info packet. That is linked in the website. It's called info packet in the title. Number two, review the online application, also linked on the website. This is a partial screenshot of the application here on your screen right now. There are several simple questions there, and I recommend using the document provided to answer these questions on your own separately, so you can just copy and paste them into this application portal when the time comes to submit your application. Three, write your scope of work. We're going to go over that more in a moment. Write your detailed budget, compile your letters of support from your project partners or supporters. Number six, get all your other documents together too. So if you have quotes or tax documents that you need to provide, we'll talk more about that too. And last but not least, submit your application online. Just like an email, you can't change it once you've sent it, so make sure everything is exactly the way you want it before you click submit. Yep, and this is your tip. Compile all those materials, answer all the questions in advance before you actually begin applying. So let's talk about the most important piece of your application. The scope of work needs to include the following items. You need a project narrative, somewhere between 200 to 500 words, all of the project deliverables associated with your grant, deliverables meaning the tangible or quantifiable products, items, or outcomes of your project. Remember those benefits that we talked about, the benefits to the watershed. Those benefits should be listed as deliverables in your scope of work. You'll also want to include a timeline of your project over the course of 2024 and a snapshot of your budget. This scope of work document shouldn't exceed 4-ish pages, and really I think you can probably accomplish describing your project in less than that. And keep in mind the people reviewing your application are volunteers, so keep it short and sweet. Include the necessary detail to get your idea across and how you'll actually execute it, but don't be overly verbose. Trust me, it'll work in your favor. The volunteers will certainly appreciate your concision here. Your budget is also super important, so make sure to get this right. Use the template that we will provide you. This is a screenshot of that template, and Sheila will show you the template in just a moment. Provide enough detail, but be concise. There are multiple fields in the template. Fill out everything that's applicable to your project, including the item description, the quantity, the rate, the total cost, and whether it's being paid for by the grant or by some sort of matching fund. Matching funds are not required, but it does make your application stronger. Matching funds could come from volunteer time, which is valued at about $30 an hour, or donations, or staff salary, or another grant. I'll give you some examples of what enough detail means, because that's kind of vague, right? For plants, you should include the name of the plant, the pot or plug size, the cost per plant, the number of those plants that you will purchase. So for example, Dune sunflower here, we've got 1 gallon buckets, $6.99 per pot, that's 20 pots. The total cost for Dune sunflowers would be $139.80. You can round that up to account for what may be inflation, or you're just not sure, maybe round that up to $150. And do remember that any plants used in the Bay Mini Grant must be native Florida plants. You must use native plants for the Bay Mini Grant. For any paid labor, describe what it's for, what their rate is, and what the total cost is. For example, if you want a graphic designer to create an educational sign for installation in the rain garden, their rate is $40 per hour, estimated 2 hours of work. The total graphic design cost is $80. You could round that up to $90 or $100 just in case. And lastly, if any one item exceeds $500, you should include at least 2 quotes for those items to provide the reviewers with a cost comparison. You don't have to pick the one with the lowest cost, but you'll want to justify why you're renting a piece of equipment for $750 instead of $600, for instance. If you do get quotes for more expensive items, make sure to include those with your application too. There are a few restrictions to keep in mind. Salary, mileage, and food should not exceed 10% of your budget for each of those. So if you're, for example, requesting the full $5,000 award, 10% or $500 of your budget can go towards salaries. 10% can go towards mileage reimbursement, and 10% can go toward food expenses. If you're only requesting $2,500 for the mini grant, 10% would be $250 and so forth. Mileage and food rates should not exceed the rates shown here. And if you are including salary for some staff member or members, describe how and why they're involved. And also make sure to include whether or not that staff person and their supervisor have agreed to this work. That would probably go in your scope of work. You definitely don't want to be assigning work to people who haven't yet agreed to help with something. Here's also a mileage reimbursement example: volunteer transportation for 4 events, 28 miles round trip, 44.5 cents per mile. That's about $50. There are some expenses that are just flat out not allowed, so make sure that these are not included in your Bay Mini Grant budget. Overhead or admin fees, lobbying, and conferences or meeting registration are not allowed. Also, don't buy stuff before you've received the official notice to proceed with the Bay Mini Grant. Also, don't expect items to get reimbursed, items or services that aren't included in your scope of work or budget. If changes need to be made to your project, we can do an amendment, but that would be sort of an extenuating circumstance. You want to make sure that any anticipated costs are included in your budget in the application. This is a blank budget spreadsheet. I'm going to open up a live document, and Sheila's going to go over some examples. Keep in mind that you're estimating costs as far as 1 year out. So you'll be submitting an application next month, September 2023, but what will costs look like in September 2024? I don't think that any of us have a crystal ball. If you do, let me know ASAP. But you can pad your expected expenditures to account for inflation or potential changes in cost. While being realistic and keeping as close to the actual cost as possible, it's better to overestimate than underestimate. So I am going to close out here. If Google cooperates with me, and I'm going to go over a scope of work. Do you want to go over the example or the template first, Sheila?
We can start with the template.
Okay, cool.
So can you make it a little bit bigger, please?
I sure can.
Yeah, that's perfect.
Is that better? Okay.
So to help folks develop strong scope of works, we developed a scope of work template that you guys can all use. So first, you're going to want to come up with a project title. So this should be short but also descriptive and must remain consistent across all of the application documents. So this is what you're going to include on your budget, your scope of work, and it's also going to be included on the online application. Scrolling down to the project narrative, this is basically a detailed summary of the proposed project and outcomes. So like Jessica said, it should be about 250 to 500 words. And so your scope should not just be answering these questions like word for word, right down the line, but you should write a narrative around what you're planning on doing, and be sure to include some answers to these questions. You'll also scroll down to project, so your scope of work also should include some project deliverables. So these are your specific performance metrics and should be clear, measurable project outcomes. So whatever you include in these deliverables, you'll be expected to track throughout the course of your project. So we've included some examples for restoration projects as well as engagement projects. So restoration metrics might include the number of plants installed or the number of volunteers engaged, things like that. There are a couple deliverables that will be on everybody's scope of work, and that's the 3 quarterly reports, the final report, and any products that are created using Bay Mini grant funds. So if you want to go to, the last thing. So as part of your scope of work, we also recommend that you include a project timeline. So this helps the applicant plan out the flow of the project and will act as a guide to remind applicants which tasks should be accomplished when. It also helps you kind of plan out how you're going to spend your awarded amounts of money. So if you want to hop on over, we do have an example of a scope of work. So feel free to use this so that you can get an idea of what we're really looking for in a strong scope of work. So yeah, if you kind of just want to scroll down. I'm not going to really read this. You guys can read this on your own, but we just want to make sure that you're aware that these types of resources are out there. You want to hop over to budget?
Budget, yeah.
Perfect. So you've seen the spreadsheet a couple times, but similar to scope of work, we've also provided you with a budget template. So basically you can just download this off of our website and use it to build your own budget for your project. So budgets are a required component of the applications. So an application submitted without a budget will not be considered for funding. So to help folks get an idea of what we expect in a budget, we have created a couple examples. So there's a good example and a bad example. So Jessica is on the good example right now. So as you'll see, there are item descriptions, plant names, sizes of pots. If she scrolls down, there's also rates and match sources. So it's very clear, very descriptive. And then if she pops over to the bad budget, the issues here are highlighted in red, just so to help you guys see like what are the major failures on this bad budget. The first, so one example of something that's an issue with this budget is there's no project name. So without a project title, we have no idea which project this budget is for. You can also see that it just says plants. So this is really a lack of detail. It doesn't describe which plants, how many, or what size pots they'll be. So please take a look at these different examples so that you don't make the same mistakes that were made in this bad budget.
My internet is very angry and moving slowly, so sorry. So yeah, like Sheila said, make sure not to request more than $5,000 for the Bay Mini grant. Make sure your math is all right, and overestimate, but be close to the amount that you anticipate the cost. And Sheila's going to talk about the evaluation criteria.
Yeah, so we've gone over eligibility, how to apply. So let's look at how your application will actually be evaluated. So after all the applications are submitted on September 15th, they will be sent to the Tampa Bay Estuary Program's Community Advisory Committee, and they will review the applications using the following criteria. So they assess how well the application demonstrates an improvement to Tampa Bay, and this also includes the watershed as a whole. They'll also be looking at the strength of the application, a demonstration of community support, and we'll really be looking to see if the applicant has the ability to complete the proposed project and are the costs justified. So to clearly demonstrate how your project will improve Tampa Bay, your scope of work should explicitly state how your project will target Bay issues. So this is really where you're going to include the different CCMP actions or the overarching goals that your project is contributing to. So in addition, you should include the measurable benefits or outcomes of your project. So these should be included in the project deliverables section of your scope of work. Also be sure to state how you will promote the Bay Mini Grant, the Tampa Bay Estuary Specialty License Plate, also called the Tarpon Tag, which is the ultimate funder of this project, or of this funding program. And so the little yellow boxes just give you an idea of where you should be putting some of this information. So when assessing the strength of the application, the reviewers are looking for that clear connection to one of the CCMP priorities. So they're also looking to see if the project time period and outcomes are realistic. So can these deliverables actually be achieved in 1 year? They're also looking for the clearly stated project goals and those clear success metrics. So to demonstrate community support, the applicant should include information on how the project will be maintained, monitored, and supported into the future. We don't want to fund a project that's just going to be putting in a rain garden that is then mowed over the next year. So really include how you're planning on keeping that and maintaining it moving forward. The scope of work should clearly state how the project enhances community stewardship. So how are you engaging the community into your project? And it should also include other community partners. We recognize we can't do our work in isolation, so you should definitely be reaching out to other organizations to see who you can get involved in your project. So to really showcase that these partners are committed to supporting your project, be sure to obtain and submit letters of support. So there is a place on the application where you can upload those documents. But keep in mind, letters of support are not required, but they do enhance the project. So the ability of the applicant is an important component of the scope of work, but we recognize that not everyone has done this type of work before. So if you have done this before, be sure to tell us that. If you have not, be sure to describe how you plan to tackle this type of project. Are you working with people? Are you talking to people who have done this type of work before and getting some insights from them? Just be clear in how you're planning on getting this work done. And as a reminder, Bay Mini Grant funds can only be used on community-owned, public-owned properties or properties on a conservation easement. And then the last review criteria is cost justification. So if you follow the template and the examples that we provided, you should get full points on this component. As a reminder, match funds are also not required, but they do enhance the project proposal. Volunteer hours can be used as match funds, and the price per hour is about $31.80, I think, at this point. But that's included on the slideshow as well as in the budget template that we've provided for you. So now you have all of the information you need to develop a strong proposal, and you know how the project will be evaluated, but what is the evaluation timeline? So all Bay Mini Grant applications, as we know, are due on September 15th. After that, applications are then sent to our review committee, which is made up of TBEP Community Advisory Committee members. And then once they provide their findings, funding for recommended projects is approved in November, and then all applicants will be notified of their funding in December. So applicants that are funded should expect to have their projects started on January 1st of 2024. So all projects that are funded are required to submit 3 quarterly reports and 1 final report. So these reporting deadlines are included here. They're also included on the project timeline in your the draft scope of work, the scope of work template. We also provide reporting templates to all of the funded projects once we really get going. So to receive reimbursement, you must submit documentation for your purchases. So this means that you'll submit not only an invoice, but you'll also submit receipts in order to be reimbursed. So basically with our Bay Mini Grant projects, you spend the money first and then you invoice us, you provide those receipts, and then we pay you back. We do provide a blank invoice template for folks that don't already have one for their organization. We do request that you invoice us roughly once per quarter, but we recognize that with some smaller organizations, this isn't feasible. So just talk to us directly and we can work something out. Also, if reimbursement is not realistic for your organization, feel free again to reach out to us directly and we can work out another situation. So just as a reminder, who is eligible: nonprofits, for-profits, governments, basically any community organization. This is a reimbursement grant of up to $5,000. The application is due at 5 p.m. on September 15th. I recommend not waiting until 4:45 to submit it because it will be closed at 5 p.m. And if you encounter any issues, you don't want to miss that deadline. So the work will take place January 1 to December 31, 2024. So your projects are pretty quick turnarounds. They only are about a year long. All projects need to be in the Tampa Bay watershed, so keep that in mind. As Jessica said, we do have a link to an interactive watershed on our website, so you can see which areas are in and which areas are outside of our watershed. Bay Mini Grants, the purpose is really to engage and inform the public. So really be thinking about how your project can engage community members to be part of restoration and education. And then how do you get this grant? Follow these instructions, recruit awesome partners, and submit a strong application by the deadline. You're also welcome to submit a draft application to either Jessica or myself by September 1st. Or schedule a 15 to 30-minute phone call with us to help get some helpful feedback.
And I put September 1st. You can submit it after that, but we can't guarantee that we'll actually get back to you before the submission deadline. So sooner the better.
So yeah,
that's the basics of the presentation. The templates, the examples, and the information packet are available on the website. And we can open it up for questions. We did have, well, before we get to questions, I just wanted to throw out there, we understand that many of you are volunteers and maybe some of you are applying for a grant for the first time. So we want to help you. We want to be a resource for you. Please do reach out with questions if they don't get answered today. We would love to assist in any way possible. So there are a few questions that came through the registration for the webinar. We're going to run through those first and then open it up to attendees. So the first one is, how can schools get involved? Have other teachers applied and won the grant? And what did they do with students in the area? Sheila, do you want to answer that one?
Yeah, sure. So schools often apply for Bay Mini grants. We have the Boys and Girls Club, which is sort of an after-school program. We also have Manatee School for the Arts. They apply pretty much every year. So really, there's a variety of different activities that you could do. Some schools have property that's available to them, and they've installed rain gardens on the school and had students actually involved in the planting of the rain garden. Colleges have participated and done sort of a restoration on their property, and then they have the restoration part of the schooling. So the botany kids will go out there and learn about phenology or flowering times or life history of the plants out there. Um, you could also do something similar to what Manatee School for the Arts does. And they basically take their students on 4 different field trips. So the funds pay for the buses, they pay for lunches for the students, and it pays for substitute teachers. So a lot of the students that go to MSA are from underserved and overburdened areas. So if you're a teacher in that area, we'd love for you to submit a project, just getting folks out and exploring the Tampa Bay estuary and the watershed, because you can't protect something unless you fall in love with it first. So those are just some ideas. If you have other thoughts, feel free to reach out to Jessica and I, and we're happy to help form a project idea with you.
Thank you. Another question was about proposal review. I think we covered that, but if you're here and you had something more specific, let us know. Another question was about red tide and using incorporating species into the bay to remove some of the pollution. I'm not sure what the question is there. I think it's just like, would that be eligible? Yes, removing pollutants with native species would totally be a restoration technique that could be undertaken. So I think that answers that question. If you're here and you're not sure if that answers the question, let us know. There's another, can this grant be used for scholarship funds for local high schoolers to attend a university's pre-college program? Sheila, do you want to answer that one?
Sure, yeah. Um, this specific question is referencing Eckerd College. So that, I guess they have a marine science pre-college program that's offered to high school students, and it's pretty pricey to attend. So the question was if we could use scholarship funds to have 2 high schoolers participate in this program. So I don't see why scholarships would not be included. So scholarships are an eligible expenditure. However, I would think it would be a stronger proposal if there was a partnership with the organization who submitted this question and Eckerd College, so that maybe they could provide a couple scholarships for students that might not be able to afford that type of program, but use some funding also for some other things, to really round out that that project idea.
Yeah, I think that brings up a good point. Like, there's definitely a difference between what's eligible and what is a strong application. So certainly it's eligible, but like Sheila is saying, that may not be the strongest application unless there are other components to it. Another question is there a minimum? Nope, there's not a minimum. If you want to do something really small, that's $200. Go for it, apply. We'd be happy to support something that's meaningful. There is a homeowner, and maybe Deborah, this is you. I see that in your chat. I'm a homeowner who's going to install a living shoreline. Would your grant apply to this type of situation? It could if there's a conservation easement. So keep in mind that often the homeowner owns the actual living shoreline, and then just landward of the seawall is owned by the public, so whether it's the county or the city or whatever it is. So if you could create a conservation easement there, there would be certainly an argument for having that funded. However, keep in mind you cannot apply as an individual, so you would have to work with your neighborhood association or some local nonprofit that was interested in being the sort of fiduciary component of that application. So it's not a full yes, and it's definitely not a full no, but hopefully that answers that question. Another is, would a project designed to minimize runoff and leaching of reclaimed water through installation of smart irrigation technology be acceptable? I think so. However, keep in mind that it would need to be on public property or like impacting the bay in some way. I think that could be a really nuanced project. I think what you may mean is reclaimed, oh, you did say reclaimed water systems in waterfront neighborhoods. I think that's something we should talk about, the logistics of that. I think there is a way to make that eligible, but I think that's something we just have to talk through and figure out the specifics. And the last question submitted via online is, I just want to learn more about the process of grant writing. Yeah, absolutely, welcome. That is something I'm happy to talk to you more about offline, especially if you plan on applying for this. We can walk through what that might look like. So let's go to questions here of people that are in attendance. I see Deborah. Did your question get answered, Deborah Rothenberger? Deborah, if you're talking, we can't hear you, so you might need to put it in the chat. I see you're off mute, but I don't hear you. Akeem, how many letters of support are required? There's no requirement of the number. It's really just if you have demonstrated support from the community, you will get that sort of boost within your application. And Sheila, if you want to, yeah.
My recommendation would be that if you're calling out specific organizations as partners on your project, that you would submit a letter of support from each one of those proposed partners. That's really what the review committee is going to be looking for. Are the partners that were detailed in the scope of work, are they actually on board with this project?
Yeah, you don't want to put somebody on the line, like reference them as a partner without showing that they do support it. So just make sure if they're mentioned that they're showing their support. Would a kids fishing derby qualify? I think so. Yeah, I think we've funded something like that recently. We had the Ladyfish Luncheon, which is actually the scope of work example. So sure.
Yeah, we've had a few. So last year we funded a Ladyfish Luncheon, like Jessica said. So that was all focused on educating women on ethical angling. And that, as part of that project, there was a classroom component. They actually took the students fishing, and then they purchased a bunch of circle hooks and fishing poles and reels and gave them out to the folks that participated in the Ladyfish Luncheon. There's also another project that's ongoing currently, and that is focused on, it's basically a fishing tournament, and so geared toward younger kids. And so that's really focused at pulling invasive species out of Tampa Bay. So the target is invasive species of fish. So a derby is a great thing and a really fundable project.
For sure, yeah. Fatima, I see your question. Can you submit several projects? Absolutely, you can. However, one entity can only receive one award each year. So if Tampa Heights Junior Civic Association submits 3 applications, there's only a chance of being awarded one of them. However, if someone else, one of your partners, for instance, applies for those other 2 or 3 applications, and you are just a partner on that application, that wouldn't be considered your project. That would be their project. For instance, if you worked with, I don't know, the city of Tampa and the city of Tampa was the applicant, they would be the applicant for that one. You would be the applicant for yours. It's not unrecommended to submit more than one, but keep in mind that the reviewers are volunteers, and if they see a dozen applications from one entity, they're maybe going to be like, what's going on here? So just keep that in mind too. Kate, pretty sure educational programming to help reduce fertilizer use in home landscapes. Would water conservation as an education topic, like more efficient irrigation, be included in the focus topics? I think your question is, would watering techniques be included in the CCMP? Yeah, I think definitely. Stormwater reduction, including just like using less of irrigation, would certainly fall under the CCMP. Sheila, I don't know if you have anything to add there too.
Yeah, I would agree.
Cool.
It would be focused on reducing nitrogen and reducing runoff into Tampa Bay.
Yeah, and Tia, absolutely. Go ahead and unmute and ask your question.
Okay, can you guys hear me?
Oh, yeah, yes. There you go. Yeah.
Good. So I'm an extension agent in the University of Florida IFAS for Hillsborough County. So I just want to put out there, if anybody has a project in Hillsborough County, possibly we could collaborate. My question is actually about doing a multi-county project. As you know, we have UF IFAS offices in all 67 counties. So if I was to do a project, say teach a Zoom webinar on, bay-friendly plants for landscaping, could I open that to residents of kind of the counties y'all mentioned at the beginning, or would I need to more like specify like their zip code? Like, could I say anybody from Pinellas, Pasco, Hillsborough, and Manatee can attend? Would that be okay? Or would you want more specific?
No, I think that's fine. I think the broader impact is great. I don't think you have to specify zip codes as long as you're making it clear that residents and businesses and whatnot within the watershed are the target audience.
Okay, great, thank you.
And if you don't have the capacity to do that type of project for the whole watershed, it's also totally okay to just do it for Hillsborough County and say, I'm going to pilot this here, and if it works, then I'll share it with our other extension agents in Pinellas and Manatee and the other areas around the watershed. So don't feel like you have to start out really huge. It's okay to start out small and pilot a project and then work out from there.
Great, thank you.
For sure. And Tatiana, would a kayak cleanup geared towards Hispanic supply? Totally, yeah. A kayak or a cleanup of any kind would be applicable, eligible, especially getting people outside, enjoying the outdoors via kayaking. Absolutely, that would definitely be applicable. And I think Hispanic and Latinx communities would fall under underrepresented audiences for Bay Mini grants, so that would be awesome as well. Tom says, woohoo, you're welcome, thank you. Jerry Whitrimmer said that a list of City of Tampa will a letter of support from him. Should I get a letter of support listing the people who serve on my if your advisory board is the person applying for the Bay Mini grant, Jerry, you don't have to get a letter of support from them as long as you have the authority to apply on their behalf. If the City of Tampa is a partner, definitely get a letter of support from them. So let me know if that's not what you're asking and if I did or did not answer your question.
Yeah, WIT should be used to apply to providing letters of support. So I would reach out to him if you're planning on putting City of Tampa as a partner, and he should respond yes.
And Kate, yep, you're right. Not all of Pasco is included in the watershed. It's a good chunk of the central and east Pasco. but not all of it. So you're right. And
But
Jerry,
if you do have a project in Pasco, we'd love to talk to you to figure out how we can make it work, and what parts maybe we could add into it that might be within the watershed. We don't get a lot of projects from Pasco, so there's a little bit of wiggle room there.
And Jerry, your question, I think, is you submitted last year, but it wasn't awarded, and you're going to resubmit that this year. That's great. If you made some changes and improvements, if you want to send that to Sheila and I in advance so we can maybe give you any feedback on that, that would be great too.
Yeah,
Tatiana?
absolutely, Jerry. Definitely, just my recommendation would be to take those sort of recommendations that were included in your letter that I sent out last year, and make sure that you make those modifications in your proposal this year, spelling out the different teachers that you were going to include and the different project partners. But yeah, feel free to send it over to us before that September 1, and we're happy to review it and give feedback.
And I think that's all the questions in the chat and that we received via email. So if there are additional questions of those here, go ahead and come off mute and let us know.
Connie, yes, outcomes for educational programs should focus on the number of people reached. That's a great metric. I would recommend that you include that one, or interactions, or folks that clicked on it, things like that.
And Kristen, I saw you come off mute. Did you want to? Yeah.
What's the best way to get a hold of you guys if we wanted to schedule a call to ask more questions specifically?
Yep, you can call us or email us. I will throw our emails into the chat, and they're also listed in the presentation, which will be online too. But I'll go ahead and give you those email addresses now.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
And I threw our phone number on there. You can reach Jessica and myself at the TVEP phone number. So feel free to call us anytime.
So I'm curious if there aren't too many more questions. By a raise of hands or throw it in the chat, who already has an idea for a project that they are interested in submitting? So raise your hand or put it in the chat, just say yes or whatever. Few people, cool.
Okay, so we've got some
Awesome.
good project ideas. Did you guys find this information helpful? Hopefully. Great.
Cool. Yeah, Connie, to your question, Sheila answered 20 to 25 grants. I think it's roughly $90,000 of projects that we're planning to award this year. So that would be that same 20 to 25 grants.
I have another question. I saw in the grant budget thing about if we're going to advertise for the tarpon tag, you have a outdoor sign or an indoor sign. Like, can you tell me a little bit more what that looks like?
Sure. Let me get a copy.
Sheila's going to show you. So we know that some projects are not going to be outside. So like a semi-permanent sign is not needed if you're doing like a digital project, for instance. So this is a physical sign that she's showing you right there.
And it gets
outdoors.
Yeah, this is an outdoor one. It gets installed on like a big metal thing. So this, for a lot of like restoration projects, this will be installed in front, so folks know, hey, this was funded by the Tampa Bay Estuary specialty license plate. And then the indoor ones are very similar, but they're kind of just like they're a similar style, but you can take them and move them, and they're not so permanent.
And if you'll recall in the evaluation criteria, there was a few points for how you plan to advertise the tarpon tag, the specialty license plate. You could commit to posting about it on social media, however many times, including it in your newsletter, whatever it is that will certainly help boost your application too, because we want people to know that that specialty license plate supports important and really great work like this. Tom, yes, I will plan to send out a recording. As long as you registered for the webinar, you should receive that recording, and we'll put it online as well, so you'll have it both ways.
It'll be on the website, so if you go to that tbep.org/Bay Mini Grants, there'll be a place where you can just click and access the webinar.
How many people here have not applied before? So you can put that in the chat or raise your hand if you would be a new applicant for the Bay Mini Grant. New applicant for any grant, I love it. Connie, I'm not sure. I mean, I do have everyone's email address that was here, so I guess I could ask everyone in the meeting if they would consent to sharing information with each other, maybe for collaboration. Sheila, have we done that before? Like, what would be the best method for that?
We haven't. I would say, Connie, maybe if you want to throw your email or contact information in the chat, and then others that are interested in collaborating will be able to reach out to you directly.
Yeah, and especially, Connie, if there is a type of project partner that you're looking for, let us know. We're happy to play like matchmaker, partner matchmaker too. And one thing that I didn't say that I think is really important is the organizations that apply don't have to have environment as your like mission. You know, I would love to see people applying that aren't specifically environmentalist groups who just want to do an environmental project of some sort. That would be cool too. So think outside the box. You don't necessarily have to partner up with local environmental groups. You can seek other nonprofits or types of schools too. Watershed education program for 5th graders, love it. Cool. And Tia shared her info, Connie too. A lot of new applicants, that's awesome.
Tom, do you still have a question? You see your hands up? Sure.
Nope, I'm good. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Tom. Any other questions from the group?
All right, y'all. Well, we appreciate your time. As we said, please do reach out to us. We're happy to help. If you can get a draft scope of work to us ASAP, that will certainly be helpful. Kristen, I said you're seeking local underserved high school juniors or seniors interested in marine science for camp scholarships. Cool. All right, well, we will wrap it up there. Feel free to reach out. You've got our email, you've got our phone numbers, and we look forward to hearing from you soon and making some good stuff happen. Thanks, y'all.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.